Hello, my listeners, and welcome back to the CLSR. And I'm your host, the counselor. And we're talking part two about separation and divorce. And what we want to really talk about right now is number one, we know how devastating separating from someone can be. And divorce can be very tedious and it can change your life forever. However, it doesn't really have to. You know, it's not always negative for everybody. Some people actually they get through it with an understanding. But what can you do to take care of yourself? A couple things that you do need to do to take care of yourself. And I would really recommend that you help yourself by scheduling some daily time or activities, for yourself. So you could be calm, relaxed, something soothing, Spend some time with some good friends. You've been taking some walks out there, in some nature. See some greenery, some scenery, and listening to some of your favorite music. I mean, if some of you are even fortunate enough to have a hot bath, I strongly recommend that. Getting massages, if it covers work, you're really trying to relax your mind and your body. And if you relax your body, your mind will follow. People say, take all these structured, organized classes like yoga and Pilates, and yeah, you could do that too. That's something that you could do, but it doesn't have to be that extreme. Could be as simple as a cup of tea. However, this is just part of taking care of yourself. And also understand your needs. Paying attention to what you might think you might need in your life. Because at any given moment, you know what I mean? You have to be able to express what your needs are. Understand what you believe in. And they're going to be a little different. See, sometimes when we've been in relationships where we've been with somebody, the truth of the matter is honestly, we've learned from them. They influence us in our lives. Right? Those people, because we've experienced some things, we've learned to adapt our lives and change our lives for those people, but somehow they've influenced us. So then a lot of, or let's say half of us that we were in tune with, we've sacrificed because of the relationship. And then we've learned to be in those relationships with that person, right? Giving them that other half. So we got to get back to paying attention to what we need, because it's so easy for us to give up part of those needs that we've had initially, right? When you think about wholeheartedly, it's automatic that when you're with somebody, you got to share. But this time, when you're going through it, you got to pay attention to your own needs without guilt. Understand what is good for you and what is right for you. And that might take a little bit of time. But that's what you're going to have to do. And I strongly recommend that people stick to routines. Because, hey, once the gloves are off, right, and the relationship is changing, you got to get some sort of stability in your life. Because of divorce or some sort of relationship that you had, any sort of breakup, it's going to disrupt things as it is. And there's going to be feelings that have to be dealt with and stresses that have to be understood and dealt with as well. And there will be some uncertainty, and for sure you can guarantee there could be some chaos. You don't want to fight this. But you want to do one thing if you can immediately. Get back to some routine or stay on the routine. Maintain the routine. Don't go into the abyss. It's so easy for us to do this. It's very common, that relationship. People do it. They get into this funk, this dark place, and they forget about the routine. No, try as much energy as that you have, put that into establishing the routine so that you still have a place that you can come from. You know what I mean? A place of balance, a place of knowledge and understanding, because this thing that you go through can be very devastating for a lot of people. So try to maintain some routine and try to stick to it. Because, getting back to this routine, it can provide a comforting sense of structure and normalcy. And I can't even emphasize enough the importance of taking time out for yourself. And that might seem passe, or blasé, but the whole point is no, it's not at all. It's something that we don't really do. Because during the initial first months of this situation that you've separated from or changed your life from, you're going to have to take the time out. And we talked about that in part 1, but this is part 2. So, you taking time out, if you're doing any change, if you're moving, if you got a new job, whatever, you're going to need to take some time out. If you have an existing job, then you're good. Maybe they understand that you can. And I know it's not going to be easy for people who are starting new jobs to take some time out. But unfortunately, you have to at least allocate time, weekends or what have you, so that you make sure you're getting the you time in there. That's what you're going to have to do. And do anything but engage in the use of alcohol and drugs during this period, just to cope. Even people using food to cope. I know that sounds a little bit strange, but there are people that do that, right? They really binge onto the foods, especially when they're in the middle of a breakup. They're tempted to do anything, and they want to relieve those feelings of loneliness, heartache, and pain. So what do? They resort to alcohol use and drug use. And some even go as far as food, and they start going crazy. They emphasize their whole life around food. And it just becomes a comfort thing. It's something that's nurturing to them. And so they can depend on it. So they lean into it, and it's something that they like. And they can easily verify and explain it. What's going on in their lives. You understand? So that's essential for them. But in reality, it's not healthy. They have to find healthier ways. You have to find healthier ways of coping with these feelings, these painful feelings of heartache. And so I really suggest that what you do is you try to explore something new. Because this situation of separation or divorce, it doesn't necessarily have to be the end of all ends. It could actually be a new start for you if you're ready for it. If you look at it that way. You can take the opportunity to explore new activities and things of interest. Right? It just gives you a chance to enjoy your life. You're living in the here and now, and you actually have an opportunity. I don't care. I think it's important that people do that, no matter what age they're at in their lives. As if they've gone through it. We all know, that there's an end someday. And we're fortunate if we can make it to that end, as long as we can live and enjoy and appreciate this life. However, you need to still explore some new interests. You need to get that understood, that it's important for you to take control of your life and explore new interests and activities, alongside making healthy choices. And I can't even stress the importance of eating well, sleeping well, and some exercise, weekly exercise. I didn't say extreme, but I'm saying weekly exercise is extremely important. People take that for granted. They go and they think because they're skinny, no. I'm talking about, especially during this time, it's so important that we make sure that our body's venting. We've got a lot of things to think about and process, a lot of feelings, emotions that we're going to be going through. So it's so important for you to exercise and make sure you're getting your sleep. And you got to eat well, right? It's so important. It's a positive way of thinking. You have to make sure that you make this a part of your lifestyle in general, but especially during these times. Eating healthy and at sleep. If you're not asleep, you're not going to be at your best. You're not even be thinking clearly, and you know what? Your negative energy is going to increase. So you need to let your brain process. See, when I think of sleep, and I think of this is a time already for the body to process. Think of all the things that you're seeing. Think of your brain and taking in all that information throughout the day. So when you go to sleep, your body gets a chance to filter that out. Because imagine a mind, I think it only has so much memory, and it's smart enough to know that what happens is you take in so many things in the day, right? Think about this. And then it has to swirl around and get loose or differentiate what's important, whatever. The whole point is when you go to sleep, your mind gets to process these things and, distinguish between what's good, what's bad, what's going to stay, whatever. Your mind is the most complex. So you need that sleep for your body to relax, because you've got a lot of intake during the day, especially if you're up early and you're taking in all this information and have these obligations and commitments and goals. So remember that. That's how complex the mind is. So if you're not getting sleep, then you're doing yourself a disservice, because you gotta. It's healthy for the heart too, for the mind and the heart. Remember that. But these are important things to understand when you are in the process of breaking up, or you've broken up, and here you are. But as long as you know, the one important thing to learn is that when you do break up, you have to learn to accept, to move on. You need to understand what has happened and acknowledge your role in that. See, too many of us don't do that. You have to acknowledge that you played a role in it. And the more you understand the choices if you've had and how they impacted your relationship, that's the better you'll be able to learn from your issues or mistakes. And then this will stop you from repeating it in the future. When you acknowledge, okay, look, I might not have done this, but then, like I said, and this could be as simple as you saying, okay, this was my role, and this is the other person's role. And I will admit that this was the type of person that I am. Maybe I wasn't the most positive, but this person, to me, either I just lost it for them, or something happened that it changed it for me. And you might have to just acknowledge that. And that's okay. All I'm saying is acknowledge it. Get it off your shoulders. Don't carry it as weight. And understand that, you know what? This is a time for you to move on in your own way. But you have to acknowledge where you were and the role that you played in that. And there may be questions that you're asking yourself. You might have to look at the big picture and think about the issues that were involved in that relationship. Like, how did you contribute to those issues that were plaguing the relationships? And you have to think of that. You have to think about the role that you played in the relationships and how big the issues became or how small they were based on how you related in there. Were you a problematic person, right? Was there something that was getting under your skin that you just could not live without, or you had to address, or you kept pushing the agenda of, or you just weren't happy? It's just, in hindsight, you're looking at it now and going, I did play a role in that. But maybe that's what I did for my survival. Maybe I wasn't happy. Maybe that's why I acted the way that I did. But you do have to understand how you contributed to that relationship. And was it what you wanted it to be, or were you trying to make it what you needed it to be? See, because we're going to talk in a little bit about not just being in a relationship, but we're going to talk about when you're in the relationship, are there things that you can do? And we'll talk about that a little bit later. Are there things that you can do to salvage that relationship? And this is why I like part 2 of the separation and divorce, because we're not just talking about negativity. No, for sure. We are going to talk about a little bit less, but let's get back to what we should be thinking about. And that is our responsibility in the relationship, because we want to learn some things. And we want to learn things because we want to know that we don't, if it's negative in us and we look at it, it's good because we can acknowledge it and we don't carry it forward into our next relationship. But if we're unwilling to acknowledge these behaviors that we have, then it's not going to be acceptable for us, right? We're just going to ignore it and pretend it doesn't exist, and it will come in, and we'll have to deal with it, and you know what? It'll be a repeating cycle. But these are opportunities. So you also have to ask yourself, you know what I mean? Have you done this before? Have you repeated the same issues and mistakes in your previous relationships? You know what I mean? Do you repeat the same mistakes? Have you chosen the wrong person in relationships after each relationship? Is it not the person for you? Are you repeatedly making the same mistakes by picking these certain people? That there's something missing there, that you just keep repeating the same pattern and your behavior has become pattern behavior. And you're not able to decipher between what's good for you or not, because you keep falling for the same old people that have the same qualities. And that's what you might have to look at. This is how deep it could get. And see, in those relationships, you also might think about like your reaction on how you deal with conflict and your insecurities in the relationship and how you deal with stress. Because every relationship has its insecurities, depending what's going on. They do. They have their insecurities and they have their conflict, and they definitely have their stressors, because life has stress. You might ask yourself, well, wait, could I have handled that better? Could I have responded more constructively? Could I have made a better decision in how to deal with it? And those are questions you might ask yourself. And a real deep question. And many of us are afraid to at least talk to... I don't know why it's so hard for people to talk the truth half the time. And I know a lot of the times they're thinking about how it's going to hurt the other person. But sometimes they don't really understand how liberating the truth can be. Yes, you're going to be judged, but at least you're being real. At least you're saying what's your piece. And what do I mean by this? I mean is, have you considered whether or not you accept other people the way they are? Not the way that they could be, or they should be, the way that they are. And see, that's the problem. And that's one of the hardest things in society. Is because when it's them, not us, we get to judge. We get to say. But can you be a genuine person and say, listen, man, for wherever you are, even gender, transgender, homosexual, heterosexual, whatever, are you able to accept people for who they are? Are you that type of person that has it in you to care about people as individuals that much? And I'm going to tell you, there are a handful, and there's a number of people that will say, yes, for sure, I don't really want to judge. But as long as it's not my life, it's their life, they're dealing with their life. No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, do you accept that this is a world, a very complex world, and there's no one game going on in this world where it's all one gender running the roost. It's just not. So if we can come from that perspective of understanding there's diversity in the humans, and we have to acknowledge that it's been there, we're judging it, but it's existing all through cultures all over the world. But are you that type of person that accepts that? Because some people have to be real, and they have to say, well, listen, this is what I was raised to believe, and this is what I believe. I don't believe I'm that type of... I can't accept it. It's just not in me. That's the more honest, respectful approach. And I would say it's acceptable as long as you accept the role that you're not going to hurt anybody or impede upon anybody in society, and push. But I think there's some change and some consideration that needs to be put forth because of the fact that you might have your traditional ways of being as an individual. However, you do have to understand there are individuals out there that are very diverse. And they're going to be diverse whether you accept it or not. And I think that you owe it to yourself to open up and say, this is a world of diversity. We just got to learn to accept it. But maybe you're not that type of person that's there yet. Maybe you just have your own beliefs. And there are a lot of people that have their own beliefs despite what they say in public. Right? You know all those people that have certain things to say. Right? They're talking in front of people, but they're only saying so many things. But in private, there's a whole different story. Are you one of those people? Are you one of those people that, you tell one story, but you believe another story? And that's where we're getting to. That's exactly where we should be. This is things that happen in relationships. And then, you don't think how it can happen in relationships, but it does. It could be like you could have a partners of a different culture or a different race. And you might love them, but there's certain things about them that you might not like. Or there's certain things that you see in society that's reflective of it, and you might not agree with the shit. Excuse my language. You might not. You might go, you know what? Actually, I'm starting to form my opinions, and it seems like all this stuff that I've loved, and I start becoming biased myself. It's easily influenced in the media, right? But it's hard. It's not easy sometimes. But the thing is if you're as real as you can be, at least you know where you stand and what is acceptable for you. At least you're not faking it. Because I think one of the hardest things is when people get in there, and it's not that necessarily that they're faking it, it's just that they're trying to accommodate and live with this realm, but they also they think it has to be just one way. And I think it can be a couple ways with an understanding. However, the worst is when we start lying to ourselves, right? And that's where it damages the relationships, when we lie to ourselves and we say it doesn't bother us. And there's too many people that out there doing it, right? Way too many people out there doing it. So, consider who you are and what you're about. And you have to ask yourself some questions in your relationship for whatever reason. And you should make sure that you examine some of those feelings that you have, those negative feelings. And that's a starting point. It really is. Examine all those negative feelings that you have towards anything associated with that relationship. That is where you start. Because a lot of people don't know. The counselor's giving it to you today. A lot of people don't know where to start when they go through the relationship. They don't, where do I start? And a lot of it is you start where, what were your negative feelings? What wasn't sitting right with you? What wasn't happening? Why were you feeling negative about this? Was it attention? Was it abuse? Was it communication? What was it about? And that's where you start. You start there. And you examine those negative feelings. Because what you're trying to do is address these feelings so that you can move on productively in your life and see relationships and how you want them to progress with an understanding of, hey, I don't want to continue to carry on the way that I've carried on. I actually want to do better in my life. And I want to learn from those negative things that I've experienced. It's a beautiful time to do it. So why not look at it, right? You need to be honest with yourself during the healing process. Forget about the blame look at what was I dealing with? What can I work with? And what do I need to change? Or can I change about that situation? Because there could be certain things that you went through that you can't really change because you moved on. There's no need to change. But if there are things in yourself that you can change and how you relate to others, that's what you do. And issues or problems that you need to work on, that's what you do. Especially with your insecurity. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk a little bit about jealousy next, because I think that plays a major part. Not the majority, but it plays a major part in why people break up. But I think it needs to be understood more. But in that time that you're dealing in these relationships, you have to look at your choices and your behavior and why you chose your partner that you did. And maybe possibly where the whole situation went wrong. And I mean, it's so easy for a lot of people to point the other finger. And that's one of the biggest things we do. Because we don't want to look at ourselves and what could be wrong with the relationship. We don't. It's so easy to point to the other person because that's what a lot of us are used to. We're used to pointing the finger at other people and how they play a role in our lives, and we are not in control, and we let them control us so much that we didn't really have any say. So we tag on to that, especially when it's over, which is cheap, it's weak, but a lot of us do, right? Oh, whatever. But remember, you have a role to play. And I would also say that there's a part of us that maybe there are people that stick it out for years and there's people that don't. But I'm just saying, if you're going into the next relationship and you've had a role to play, look at the reasons why you are in the situation or out of the situation. I think it's important for us to do. because it's not that deep for everyone. Some people know clearly why they've left relationships, and they're like, well, I'm just happy to move on. And you know what? They make conscious decisions not to even get into other relationships after that. Right? So they won't even do that. So they won't even, they're like, you know what? I've had a relationship. I've been married. I've had the whole shebang bang. And you know what? I don't want that anymore. I don't need it. I don't want it. I had it. I don't want it. I'm getting older and I like my freedom. And there's people that like their freedom right from the jump. And they could have the ideal situation. And once they know themselves and they understand themselves, there's no way they're going to hook up and get chained to that wagon. That's what they believe. And that's the way they feel. It's different for different people. And they love their freedom. And that's okay. Right? For certain people. Because it's diversity out there. We don't like to acknowledge it, but it is. There's different people doing different things. But it's true. And see, people who are attached in relationships see it totally different from people who don't want to be attached. Or people who've been attached and weren't attached anymore. A lot of them are like, you know what? I'm okay with it. And then there's ones that, no, I want to be with somebody. I need to be with somebody. I'm that type of person. And there are those type of people that just want some attention. You know? How that goes with time, we'll have to learn more and more about. But I will say, when you're in that situation where you are in the process of moving on, it's important to understand that you personally, right, have to get control of your life. And you have to know the role you played in your prior relationship and where you're headed. So I have to talk about jealousy, and a lot of us are still trying to understand why we're so jealous. That is such a deep word, a deep concept. You know, it takes over relationships. It can make you very stressed, depressed, and agitated and angry. And it can really overwhelm, take over you, or even hijack your emotions. Especially sexual jealousy. It's so powerful. It leads people to break up their romantic relationships, or even marriages. It can be very destructive. And it's a question. It's a never-ending question of, why do we feel such jealousy? You know, is this something that we're causing ourselves, or have we not accepted that maybe there's human beings that we just don't own, possess? Like, it is such a serious issue. You know what I mean? It's like we're suffering because of it, this jealousy. Forget lack of understanding. It's this jealousy is so deep in many of us. And do we want to suffer? No, we don't want to suffer. But hey, when you impart your love and your feelings and your commitment and your time into other people, anytime you feel that threatened, right? It's just, you get to those jealous feelings, which can lead to some serious suffering, or your partner suffering, you know? And you got to ask yourself, how senseless is this thing? But it's very real for a number of us. And we have to think about what is contributing to this thing. You know, why is this, what's contributed to such a heavy emotion, this jealousy? I'm telling you, there's people out there that are really there's people who've killed for it. People who have dismissed a whole family. People who walked away from marriages, right? People who have just had enough. And people who've broken up marriages is over jealousy. People whose relationships just were plagued through this thing and they just can't get a hold of it. And it's not getting easier with technology, the use of social media. So people are very, very jealous. And they're quick for the responses. And you know, oftentimes, and you've seen it many times, it doesn't even have to be a relationship. Some people you see out of jealousy, some of the extremes that they go to. Sometimes it just doesn't make sense. But see, this is why we suffer. It's because of this jealousy, and we act out, right? These jealous feelings, they lead to our suffering. Because there's things that we're doing, right? we become invested in someone and we act out. It's like a trigger in a lot of people. And it triggers some people more than others, but you've seen that it goes to the highest of high. I mean, when you think about it, jealousy in men is really mainly about sexual infidelity. While women are more jealous about emotional closeness with a competitor. That's where jealousy can generally root itself if we have a basic understanding of jealousy. And there's jealousy amongst siblings, right? And it happens. Any competitors in the families or friends, people get jealous of them. They compete. And there's an emotion that's evolved in that. And it persists each day in many of us. Someone coming new that's not used to being around. And people see them as unfamiliar. It's a light jealousy, but it's still a little bit of jealousy. Whether you want to look at it or not. And you have to understand that there are factors that contribute to greater jealousy. Loss of betrayal. If somebody, loses their parent, their father, like a son loses his father, and had cheated on his mother, who had cheated on his mother for years. And everyone knew except for him. How could he trust anyone after that? Think about that. There's a jealousy there. And that's weird. And we do have to acknowledge that the length of the relationship or the amount of commitment you had invested in the relationship, it kind of emphasizes the amount of jealousy that you're going to feel. I mean, if you have gone through a stronghold where, you've done all these steps and you've gotten to the relationship, you had a strong courtship, you've invested a lot of time, you've been in love, and, your ups and downs, your commitment, the length of time, right? These things will determine some of your levels of jealousy, which could be very strong or not so strong if you're not really that attached to the person and there wasn't such a strong level of commitment. So that's what we have to think about as well. It could be more superficial for people who have just had a short relationship and a minimal amount of commitment. And you think about jealousy, and where does that and uncertainty, where do they collide? Where do they converge? And you have to think about some of the people who are in long-term relationships. Those are people that may be less prone to jealousy because they're in long-term relationships, right? But there are people who are in relationships where when they're with their partners, they're in a less position where they're not as committed to the relationship as one individual. So their expectations around monogamy, and they differ, especially in their values as appropriate behavior. Some people might want to be in relationships. They just figure, hey, we're married, but why can't we go and mess with other people? There are people that do that. They get it, and then there's people that get the partner involved and say, listen, why don't we do things such as swinging? And there are people that do that too. They have their clubs all over the place. But see, where the issue can be exposed is when that person who goes along for that ride, who thought it was good for them, changes up. They said, well, I'm not into swinging after a while, right? They might go, it's not for me. But this person could be into it, And then you have to ask yourself, do you have a sex addict on your hand? And it's true, you got to ask yourself that. Because there are people out there who are sex addicts and they bring their partners along for the ride. And if the partner loves them and they want to do everything, they might go, yeah, I'm in it. But then when they change and go, this is not really for me. I don't really find a sense of comfort, a sense of peace and individuality. It's just not for me. And that's when the relationships can bust. And there could be jealousy, right? That jealousy could be like, I thought about it and maybe I don't like my partner with another person. And it can change. See, this is why we're humans. We can change. And it can impact the relationship. But that's another form of jealousy. It's the uncertainty about the relationship. They are. And desirable alternatives are out there. Relationships are many things. Essential to your happiness is, have you thought about alternatives? Is it something that you want to consider? Are you less prone to jealousy, if you're going to consider alternatives? You just have to think about that. If you have friends and family who you can rely on, you're less prone to fear the losing of the relationship. It makes sense. But there are people who aren't into alternatives, people stick to the relationship. They say, listen, if I start listening to people, the friends and family outside of my relationship, it's going to impact my relationship, and that might not be good for me. So there are just different things to consider, because it's a different perception that you might have to take, So how could you change it up, per se? Well, one thing you have to consider is that there are a number of people out there who are out there messing around, and that's one thing. But a lot of people aren't messing around, and if those people who are jealous of the people who aren't even messing around, one thing that could be contributed to that is low self-esteem. Low self-esteem strongly correlates to jealousy. More jealousy, in fact. Especially between two people. Jealousy can sometimes be the result of low self-esteem. Some person's feeling low, and they're insecure, and they're worried, and they're bringing on things, and they're looking for things, and they're acting on things, and they're just going crazy. And I'm not saying that people, when you get the feeling of jealousy, that something is going wrong. But see, that's one thing we have to think about too. What about that feeling of jealousy? Have you ever thought, is it possible you're in a relationship and you're like, could that person really be messing up? Well, they could be, but there's always something that stops us from looking into it. And that's what we have to think about. What's stopping us from looking into it? We don't want to be considered paranoid, but most of us just look past it and go whatever. And it's not just because we're going to find out later, but when you get that feeling, it's almost like a unique feeling that we can choose to act on or not. But it's a feeling of imbalance. It's signaling an imbalance in the relationship. And that is so unique to us as humans. And I don't know how much many of you have looked at it, but it's such a feeling where you go, this jealousy is a feeling. It's a unique feeling. And how much should I act on it? And then you start, in your mind, you start going, well, if I act on it, where am I going to be mentally? Right? If I act on it, do I really want what I'm going to find at the end of that investigation or looking into? Do I really want to? Do I want my world? Because people have to consider, because there is a possibility that their world could get upside down because of it if they look into it. See, I think some people are afraid of it, but it could still rear its head, and it might not for years. Who knows? But my point is, you've been signaled there's an imbalance, and see, this is where you find yourself in such a unique position, because you're like, should I act on it? And if you've ever had that happen before, I don't know how many times that could happen, but if you ever had it happen to you before, where you had a partner who did something on you, and you had a feeling that they were doing something, and you either called it or you caught them, then you're just like, oh my God, it wasn't such a good feeling. So it feels so weird to go back to that feeling, right? So you want to think of, okay, you don't really want to think about the past, but you're just like, that feeling, and it's not a great feeling. And some people just try, if anything, to avoid that feeling, because it doesn't matter if they move on. It's just that they want to avoid it. It's just a very uncomfortable feeling, right? It's a way, and it's a way of thinking too. It's almost like you've been hijacked. You become focused that there's a threat out there, so you start to jump to some conclusions. And you start to think, am I going to be alone? Is someone going to be there for me? Is someone going to leave me? And some are you okay with that? Some of you are like, whatever. If they do it, whatever. That's their loss. And then there's other people like, oh my God, what's going to really happen? So this is what engages us in our minds, right? And how could he be interested in someone else, or is she interested in somebody else? And wow, what am I doing? Or there's just so many things that you consider during these times of thinking, during this whole jealousy thing, that it's a very important part of your relationship. These thoughts that come into your head, and then of course you're going to ask yourself, how unrealistic are these assumptions? Am I really being rational, transparent? Is there something going on in my relationship that I'm overlooking? Or do I not even really care? Because we know one thing is that, sometimes when we're in relationships, there are rules and conflicts, that end up being the mainstay in our relationships that we just live with. And they're almost impossible to endure over too long a period of time. And we have to look at ourselves and we say, you know what, do we want to be free from those things? Are we just acting out subconsciously because we're just tired of the regular, or we need change in our life? And it could be very possible. And some people, and see, this is the thing too, like, when you think about it, is we could always have these explanations on why these jealous feelings occur. But we know one thing is that they are very strong and they're very influential feelings, and they can lead to behaviors that make us do things that are worse than we ever thought we could do. Like interrogating people, checking in on them, stalking them, threatening them, criticizing people who they've engaged with in some sort, or just simply withdrawing from your partner. And these are strategies that a lot of people engage in, but more often than not, it does not work. Right? It happens, but it does not work. Generally, what happens is the person gets driven away because the person engages in that, if they do it too much. And if you come to live with that and accept it, then I guess that's okay for you. But these things do threaten a relationship. But there are a lot of women out there that would say, listen, that could be a bunch of crap too on another side of it, because I have actually taken the step to investigate and interrogate and check and do it. I'll tell you right now, I'd say 80% of them will tell you, well, 80% of the time, there's some stuff there. There's something there. So I'm not crazy as much as you want. Because a lot of times men especially, will disregard them as, you're crazy, what's wrong with you? But women too. They're quick with that. But they also know, they do that thing where they get into the investigating and interrogating. They know themselves, like, listen, there's a lot of times they find a little bit of something. How deep it is another story. But men, that's where they get agitated a lot of times, right? When they're being interrogated. And sometimes the women would say they're agitated because they're guilty of something. So it's a game. It's a vicious game. But ultimately, jealousy is about the two people who are feeling connected to each other. There are ways that you can try to work through jealousy, but I would say talk about the jealousy. Don't hide it. Understand that, hey, I think it was probably better if you had a relationship and you talk about, hey, your feelings, and say, listen, I feel a little uneasy. If there's something going on, let me know. Because I feel better like that. Being straight up. They're not going to like it. And some won't let you know. But if you get a partner that wants to let you, hey, something's wrong. Hey, maybe they want to salvage the relationship. Maybe they want to work things out. Maybe they're willing to. And maybe they're willing to take the chance. Because maybe they're out there for their reasons, and either they've given up or they don't feel there's a way that they can come back. But maybe if they have somebody who that they can talk to, who's willing to say, and I'm not saying you're going to guarantee them you're going to be in their relationship after that, but sometimes it's better than going through the rigmarole of running all around, acting crazy, and trying to figure out where you went wrong during this whole process. That could be, very, 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 very impressive. It could really deteriorate your relationship and your life if you let it. So you don't want to run around too much. Make your life more difficult than it has to be. You have to understand that you're going to have differences. And if you are trying to talk about your jealousy, you have to come up with some sort of mutual plan for coping with your differences. It could be a hard conversation, but your ultimate goal is to build some sort of trust. You could try to talk about it so that it doesn't become something too intense where it's beyond the point of reconciliation. And you don't want to worry either too much about it falling apart. So if you could eliminate a lot of that, sometimes it's better to talk about it. Work through it with someone. Understand that, if we're not happy if something's going on, try to talk about it. Try to work through it. And many people think that the only answer is just for you to move on and walk away from it and say, hey, whatever, we have no choice. But there are choices out there. And some of the choices could include things that you could do to save your marriage. Are there things that you could do to save your marriage from divorce or separation? Well, I believe there are some things. I know we talked about jealousy and how deep that could be, but there are things that you could do to save your marriage. But unfortunately, many of you do not want to take these steps. Either you're in the middle of your marriage and you're having these problems and you feel that there's no way that this marriage is going to last, or there's something in it that's detrimental to the relationship that can't be changed. But for some reason, there are people who have this common belief that going to a marriage counselor is akin to admitting some sort of defeat in their marriage, which couldn't be any further from the truth. I really think therapy should be a regular part of a marriage. Whether you think it is, but it should be. Like you're going to have, if you have children in your marriage, you're going to be going to counseling for different things. So why not put marriage therapy up on that list, especially when you understand that relationships take work. You got to understand that it's not just a give and take situation and it's easily defined. No, it's a work all the time, and awareness and needs and commitment and love and problems, issues, addictions. Like, it's so varied, the marriage relationship, but it needs work. So this marriage counseling is something that I strongly recommend. And see, in anything that you do, we should always be trying to maintain or be sustainable, at least, in anything that we do. So even if you're working a job, thinking about it, if you want to maintain relevant, you got to keep up on things. So it's just like in a relationship, in a marriage, especially the longer it goes, you're going to have to switch it up, change it up. And sometimes understand it's just like a car. You got to maintain it. It'll run for a while, but you got to maintain it. Look at it like that. You got to keep on top of it. You got to take care of them. So a marriage counselor is something that will definitely help. But people, that's the last thing many of them do until it's too late, right? Oh, we've had such a good run, but our relationship is worn out, so let's just move on. Or they feel, oh, see, now we're having problems. Now we're having problems near the end of this thing that we're in, this commitment. And so I think because we're having these problems now we're going to go see a marriage counselor. Well, most people do it that way. When they see trouble coming, and they end up getting into these relationships, into these where they say, at the end of this relationship, this is going to be my last bout. I'm going to actually try and go for a marriage counselor, see if I can fix it. And often it's too late. So I really recommend that if you're in the middle of a relationship, or if you're looking to commit to a long term, that you do some checks and balances. And that means that you might have a partner who's not really as willing to do it, but you're going to let them know along the way, we've got to keep this thing going. We have to be able to discuss things freely and openly. And when issues come along, putting a little effort and work into our relationship is going to be beneficial. So this is something that is strongly recommended, but a lot of people can't make the change. They don't want to make the mental shift, and you have to. If you're going to try to save your marriage and your relationship, you have to make a mental shift, a change. you have to tell yourself, it's like going to the doctor regularly. You have to convince yourself that, you know what, no, it's not too late. There are things that I can do, that we can do to make it work. And I'm thinking, there are people out there that the emotion is so strong that they've made up their mind. They're not willing to make that shift. But however, if you are going to try to save your marriage, you're going to make a change in your mindset. You're going to put your thoughts only focused on what you could do to make the situation work, or to advance the situation into a positive perspective, where you can think of things that you could practically do that could make a difference in that relationship. But there are major things that should be considered, and I'm always going with counseling, especially if you're looking to save a relationship. Counseling is very big, and counseling is something that people underestimate, and they don't realize that a divorce, 90% of divorces, they stay that way. 90%. People separate, they go their own ways, boom. Less than 10% actually get back together or even married. Maybe they have some form of relationships, but other than that, when you divorce, you're gone. 90% splitsville, whole different life, move on. But some of the things you can do would be counseling, for sure. Get counseling when things are pretty good. Not great, but they're pretty good, and you'll find that you're much happier. Not when the relationship's on the downturn. And forget the mindset of, and you have to change it, that people who aren't mentally prepared go into counseling. You have to say that, oh no, it's not a mental issue. This is something that, I'm going to do. And I'm going to step up and say it's not for weaklings. It's for people who actually realize and are trying to make a difference. Because there is a stereotype out there about counseling. Oh, if you're going into counseling, that means you're not strong enough to handle your relationship. You don't realize that you can do it yourself. Well, no. Don't try to fight that battle. Don't try to buy into that stereotype that only weak people go for counseling. It's most important that you treat it with respect and understand, regardless of what other people think. If you're in it to win it, then you're in it for the relationship. You're in it to try to make things work. So it's not for the weak or the meek. Change that mindset. And then there's other people that say, only tough women or tough men, they don't go for counseling. If you're strong and you know what you're talking about, or you know what relationships are about, you won't go to counseling. You can't open up. You're not going to do that. You're strong. You can handle it. And people around you will force you into that peer pressure of, oh, you don't need counseling. You just need to listen, or you need to find these small remedies, which I don't find is productive at all in any sense of the word. I find that people will pressure you into doing things that you really don't want to do. And if you're weak in your mind, then you're going to follow them. And then next thing you know, those influencers get into your relationship and it's just a disaster. So no, it's not for tough girls or tough guys. No, that's not it. Being tough has nothing to do with counseling. You have to understand that. No. Drop all of the facade and get real with yourself. And if you want to make it work, you talk with your partner. You say, look, we're either going to work together and get this thing worked out, and we're going to drop all the foolishness, some of the practices that we've kind of learned and stereotypes that we bought into. We're going to have to alleviate that. And there are people who also, they take on this understanding like, you know what? My parents didn't go for it, so why should I? And they've been together for years. Why didn't they go for counseling? I don't need to go for counseling. They didn't. And, I come from them. So there's got to be something here that I can do on my own. There's got to be. So I'm not going to go for it because my parents didn't go for it. Um, Times have changed. And I think they do. And I think even when we think of marriage and relationships, the influences on a relationship. When I mean times have changed, like maybe 30 years ago when your parents were operating, they might not have been operating under the guise of, internet, access to sites, children, having a lot more power than they did back then, access to everything, the need generation, the me generation. Things have changed. Back then, 30 years ago, they didn't have to deal with half of these things. They didn't even have to deal with the pressures of such high, for example, expectations when it comes to financial commitments and financial needs. So there's so many dynamics that have changed in a 30-year period that can influence a marriage, right? Because we said some of the top reasons why people get divorced is through financial, right? They can't even afford to be in a relationship anymore because, something's gone wrong financially, their commitment, their job. People leave each other when people lose their jobs. And when someone sees somebody can't handle it, there's just so many dynamics. But you got to take it on as an individual commitment and an individual goal that you are going to not buy into the foolishness. There's nothing wrong with you telling your partner that, hey, we've got something wrong going on here and we need to do some work. We have to stop lying to ourselves. We have a problem. And if we really want to work through this thing, we have to come together. And you might need to convince your partner of this. You might need to convince them that it's worth fighting for, that you want to save your marriage. But above all else, you have to have that conversation. And the reason why you have to have that conversation is because you want to know from the onset, before you start going into all this effort, that somebody's on board with you. Because I really believe that there's no sense of you trying to pull it together when you don't have a willing partner. You're going to waste a lot of time and energy. Think about that. I mean, 50% of marriages end in divorce. And you have to understand that you have to have that partner on side that wants to go through that recovery journey with you. They want to save this marriage, and they're willing to. And try to approach them and be realistic. If you're talking to your partner about it and they agree and they try, that's what's important. Not to put, we got to do this, and put a whole list of commitments on them where it becomes exhausting. Start in one spot. Start somewhere and say, look, I think that we've gotten off track somewhere, and together, I think if we try, we could possibly work this out if we want to make this work. And this is maybe where we could start. And come to an agreement of where the starting point could be. And there are a number of things that could happen. A number of things. But if you really want to save your marriage, you have to listen to your partner. Number one. Whenever a marriage breaks down, it's often the case that both parties have issues that need to be dealt with. And this is where the marriage counseling, it becomes important. Receiving marriage therapy will likely only result in a short-term solution, but you have to figure out in your relationship how to mend it. And simply by listening to the other person, you can help understand what is wrong with the relationship. And you may even hear some recommendations on how to save your marriage from divorce. Being a good listener. Communication breakdown. It happens in so many different ways. It's often the root cause of a relationship's problems. So repairing it can be extremely beneficial when learning how to save a marriage. Listening to your partner gives some understanding on how she is feeling or he is feeling. And it may change the dynamics of, somebody who's been feeling like they've been shut out, haven't been listened to, or they don't have power. Now, the counselor is always talking about personal power. And some people are out there going, personal power, what do you mean? Personal power is inside of you. And it comes out in your relationships. And the personal power I'm talking about is when you're in a relationship with a partner, if one person's getting all the power, the other person's feeling powerless, there's a power imbalance. And in relationships and marriages, there's a power imbalance. When one person is getting all the attention, all the power, and not recognizing their partner, or the other person's continuously craving all this attention, and they feel, and it could be because they're feeling powerless. They're feeling like they're not valued. And so you have to take on that number one, boom, listening. And if you listen, is that going to save the relationship? No, but it's going to help. It's going to help tie up some loose ends in certain areas. It's a great starting place. Just listening. And being there for people who want to or need to express their feelings. In addition to listening to your partner's feelings, you need to be able to express your own feelings so your partner can understand your point of view. It's never an easy thing to express frustrations and difficulties when the person you love most dearly. Having a marriage counselor is going to help you, but you got to be able to express your feelings. And maybe that third person, that biased opinion, is going to be it's like a vent, because a lot of times when we say something to our partners that they don't like and they're not ready to receive, then all these emotions and all these images and feelings start to get triggered, and next thing you know, we're back at square one again. You're expressing your feelings and then somebody reacts to it, and then you don't really get a chance to express your feelings. So having a counselor is going to help you in these exchanges. A counselor can give you confidence to speak your mind, while you're keeping some discourse rational. They're giving you a chance to be heard. And it's a great starting point, because some people aren't really hurt or felt they're hurt. And it might make that person go, wait, this relationship isn't that bad. Maybe if this person could understand just this little thing of listening, it prevents a lot of resentment. You know what I mean? So then they're willing to work. But it's really designed, marriage therapy. It's designed for you to work through your problems when you have a spouse. It's analytical. It's not more critical. It's more analytical. It's not, it's ways to find out what's going on. And your ability to listen and understand that each partner has to express their feelings and share their feelings. This can help address some of the problems. But one thing that I find has been beneficial in my relationship is my ability to compromise. It plays such a big role in so many relationships that you wouldn't believe that people have the egos that they do, and their unwillingness, through history, through emotions, through hurt and pain, their unwillingness to compromise. It's almost like they've given up. But saving a marriage from divorce depends on how much each party is willing to accommodate the other person. And your other partner should be open to your wanting to, look at these ideas and views that you have. They have to be open to it. So two people who are willing to bend a little bit, and understand that each other's needs, and they want to meet in the middle and discover what's going on, where they both can be pleased with the dynamics of the relationships. Just being able to compromise does wonders for a relationship. Marriage relies on each party being able to put aside individual desires and wants, and encompassing each other's feelings, ability to listen, willingness to compromise. These are things that make your relationship more sustainable. However, most people find that out too late. And they can go to marriage counseling, and I say one big thing is understanding when you are going to a marriage counselor. If you're going there at the end of the relationship, it's almost like you're drowning and someone's throwing you a raft, and you're basically coming out, and it's too late for the other person. The other person feels like they're throwing you a line and they got to rescue you, and it's too much work, and they've given up and they're ready to move on. But what's really important is, aside from listening, compromising, right? Blaming. Try not to assign blame to your partner. Too much blame, it does not add up to a viable relationship. Blame, pointing the finger at your partner will only make her or him feel further disconnected from you. And they might not want to repair it because they feel that they're always being blamed, or they've never gotten their say, or they don't feel they've been justified in their explanation, or no one's listening to them. But if you're constantly blaming the other person, that is an immediate turnoff. It takes two in a relationship. However, if one person is always pointing the finger, what's the other person doing? One's exerting their power and the other one's being a victim. So you have to stop the what? The blame game. People in the relationship often have grievances, which they believe are caused by the other party. And their lack of communication and unrealistic expectations. These are things that easily lead to the blame game. I have to be right. Blaming your partner for all the problems is counterproductive, and it doesn't contribute to restoring the relationship. In actuality, it does the opposite. It just further separates them, and they don't want to come together. They're not going to meet you halfway because they can't see things changing. They're going to feel that they're dealing with the same dynamics, and there's no reason for them to turn around, even for you, even if they love you and they're feeling, hey, I can't be on the receiving. I've been on the receiving end of this blame for years. I've had enough of it, and this is why we're going down the tubes. So the blame game, we have to stop blaming the other person and be accountable and take responsibility. One thing that scares a lot of people in trying to save your marriage, and I know it's very nerve-ending for a lot of people, and it really depends on where your relationship is, where the current state of your relationship is. And it may be, if you are strong enough, it may be a great idea to spend a little time apart so you and your partner can organize your thoughts and your feelings. And that scares a lot of people because people have been in relationship for years and they depend on each other. And they don't want to go anywhere. They feel that, hey, you know what, we're having hard times, but what does this mean? What is going to pop up its ugly head right? What do you mean spend time apart? Well, I think that I need a little bit of time. I think we should take a little time to think about it. And what does the other person, they might feel threatened. They might feel that you're trying to push out of the relationship, that you're just trying to escape. And what do? They hit you with that blame game. You're just trying to run away. You're always running away from your problems. You're never looking at them. No, that's not what your intent is. But you could find that you're in that predicament where your partner might feel threatened by that. However, it may be necessary. Most people don't realize that taking a break in a relationship can be exactly what is needed when thinking how to save a marriage. If the marriage is being stressful for quite some time, then spending some time away from each other can help you and them reevaluate where things are or where they're going and how the relationship has been doing, and just get you some perspective. And then you start to reflect, especially if you're willing to change and you want to save it. It can give your partner time and some breathing space. And maybe after taking a little bit of time apart, you might realize that what it's like to be with or without that partner. And maybe get you an understanding and some perspective on how maybe you want to put some effort into this. How much are you going to commit? When you spend a little time away and you realize that you're not with that person anymore, how much are you valuing that person? You get some really good time to assess. See, a lot of us don't get time to think for ourselves. We don't think for ourselves because we're so busy, we're so caught up, we have so many commitments, we're moving all the time. But when you actually take some time apart, it could be scary for a lot, but it could be necessary. And when it comes to that point, that is when you can realize, hey, I'm taking this time away and I'm figuring out how much I really want to be in this relationship. Yes, I said it. How much do I really want to be in this relationship? And once you come to those realize, and how much does this person that I'm with value and appreciate me, and how much do I really appreciate them? Is it me that I can change, or is it them? So you just start to think and realize your commitment to that relationship. And when you do take a little bit of time, and you might have to, but if you take time, just make sure you're explaining to your partner what your whole goal is, because there will be some insecurities and some vulnerabilities where they might think you're just running out there and running around and finding someone else or whatever. The whole point is just don't do it in a whim. Go off for a little bit of time and then decide you want to come back after a month or so. You know what I mean? And then, it's way too late. Way gone. No, when I'm talking about taking some time out, I'm talking about conversating with your partner and saying, listen, maybe a little bit of time. I think we might need it. Let's agree to take some time to work on this relationship, but I think we need to get some perspective, right? That's going to be helpful. One of the hardest things to do in the relationship is learning to forgive and forget. I said it, learning to forgive and forget. That can drag a relationship down. Down, 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 down. Holding on to the past. How many of you are holding on to the past? Wrongs your partner may have committed against you. Everyone, and I do mean everyone, makes mistakes. But learning how to forgive those wrongs will pay dividends on your journey of learning how to save a marriage. It isn't useful or conducive to any harmony to keep digging up the past whenever you feel aggrieved by something your partner has done. And that's the first thing we do when we get into some of our battles and our conflicts and our arguments, is we start bringing up the past. It might be 10 years old, but we can't get rid of it. It's lingering in us. It's our defense, so we do it. But we don't understand how damaged it is. Could you imagine you moved on, you made your mistake, and you're trying to move on, and somebody keeps throwing it in your face? I don't care how deep you love them. And they keep throwing it in your face, and you can't move on as a person. See, that's why some people move out of marriages. Because they're tired of it. We know we're human beings, and we're going to make mistakes. But you're with the partner that can't let go, and they use it. And some people use it and they got you under a rock, and it upsets you, and you just don't feel that you can move forward in your life. So this person, every time you're moving forward, you're doing some good things, and you've even committed over a year or so or more to this person and show them that you've changed. What happens? As soon as there's a little friction, that person does what? They throw it right back in your face. So you're never gaining ground. So learning to forgive and forget can help restore and balance your marriage. And saving a marriage also depends on whether or not your partner has the ability to apologize. Man, that's so hard for people to do. I'm sorry, I messed up. I really sincerely apologize. Like, that is hard for people to do. Why is it so hard for people to do? I'm sorry, it is. And I think the older we get, the more challenge it is for those words to come out. I'm sorry, I apologize, I made a mistake. Use it. It catches people off guard, but it really works in a lot of situations when you can acknowledge. You can say you're sorry. And if your partner doesn't say they're sorry, and you're looking for it all the time, then things need to change. Something's going wrong. But what is important is that we stop and we take perspective and we learn to forgive. And yes, I said forget. You're going to have to forget. People say, I'll never forget. Well, you'll never forget because you don't want to forget. And if you understand the damage that you're doing when you're throwing it at your partner, or when they're throwing it at you, when they throw things at you, how does that make you feel? It makes you feel terrible because you're just trying to live your life. And you made a mistake. And if you've learned from those mistakes, that person's just chopping you down. And you can't have that. You have to learn to forgive and forget. It could be one of the hardest things you do, but if you really care about that relationship and you want to survive in that relationship, you are going to do that. You are going to forgive and forget. As deep and as hard as it can. And see, this is right here where you have to think to yourself, well, can I do that? I'm telling you to do it, but are you the type of person that knows how to forgive and forget? Because some people do, and this is so common. Some people go, oh, I did forgive you. But then they play the psychological games with their partner, see? And I'm not just talking about the words that's coming out your mouth just through arguing. When I mean forgive and forget, I mean, have you really put it past you? Because there's so many people that say they forgive and oh, I forgave you for that. But in their actions, how they treat that person is what's terrible. They don't say too much, but in their actions speak louder than their words. And the treatment of their partner, it deteriorates the relationship. And it's very common among relationships where somebody has done something and they can be forgiven for it. And that person still with them because they love them. Remember, they loved you. You made the mistake. But I still love you. However, I'm not willing to give you up yet. I'm not willing to really forgive. I'm going to actually show you through my actions that, I love you, but I'm also not healed from it. And see, this is where it gets deep. When people say, you know what, it wasn't what you said, it's what you were doing. You said you forgave me, but you've been treating me this way for so long. And I'm seeing through it now. And now that I can see through your manipulation, then I've had enough. And that's where people end it. And that's when they say, you know what, I can't do this anymore. You're not going to change because you showed me you couldn't change. You showed me you say one thing, but you do another. You hear that statement. You say one thing, but you do another. You say you love me. You say you're committed to me and you care about me, but you're showing me something totally different. And it's because you have not learned to forgive and forget. And all of us in all relationships have done things that we need forgiveness for. However, some people aren't strong enough to forgive. And that's what we say. If you're that type of person that's not willing to, or you can't, it's too deep, I can't go, I can't forgive that, then you know what? It may be in the best interest of the relationship to move on. It just might. And this is going to be one of the things too, like when I even talk about cheating, like in a relationship, if you cheat, and this is where they talk about cheating could be really hurtful in the sense that if you have a partner and usually it's people closest to you that really hurt you, to be honest with you. That's a very common thing, because the more people know about you, the more they can test your boundaries and decide how far they're going to push it. But the truth is, I really believe that a lot of people who hurt you are the ones that are closest to you. So it could be your best friend sleeping with your wife or something like that. In that situation, those people know that they're hurting you, and that's something you can't get over. Right? I can't forgive. I can't forget. Because even in that situation, think about it. If it's your best friend, sleeps with your wife, maybe he's not your best friend. But what if he's still your friend, and you know what I mean? And you and your wife, they split up. You both split up. Your wife and you split up because she done messed with your best friend. Well, the thing is, you giving up your wife is one thing. I can understand that, because that's hard. That hurts. But also your best friend, you might have to give up your best friend too if you're not strong enough to handle. Because either way, when you do that, you're either giving up both or you're not. So something has to give. But my point is that these people that are close to you, sometimes you have to give up that situation. There's no coming back from it. Whether you forgive or not. Forgive and forget could mean, you know what, I still got to move on from this, because every time I see him, it reminds me of them and and it just messes things up. Don't try to lie to yourself. That's what's really important. Just understand that the people, sister sleeping with the husband, or, of a sister, like, you sleeping with friends, or family members in there messing around. Like, there's so many things and instances that you can think of where forgiveness could be feeling next to impossible. But that's really a personal thing. And that's where you look inside yourself and say, am I really going to live with this? Am I really going to have to deal with these things? Am I able to do that? Because if I'm kind of on the fence, then I'm not really going to do it, because I'm going to do more harm than good. And so that's where you look at it. You go, is this thing really going to be, I can forgive and forget for sure. But there are some instances that are so deep and they're so connected to you, it's almost impossible for you to move or keep moving in that direction of forgiveness. Sometimes you got to forgive and forget and move on. Don't mean necessarily you got to forgive and forget and stay in there and endure. No, you have a choice. But if you're trying to save your marriage, you have to decide at what level this is. Is this the extreme level, or if it's, I can work with this level? And that's a decision that you make when you're trying to save your marriage. But also, learning how to save a marriage from divorce is trying to find some common goals you share with your partner. And the way you find some common goals is you have to get some support, some counseling. You've got to be able to put forward some suggestions that are acceptable to both of you in your relationship, both parties. And that may mean compromising. There will be some compromises that will need to be made in order for you to preserve. But the ability to compromise is one of your anchors in a marriage. So think, many things you have in common with your partner, and agreeing to some goals that are acceptable for both of you may take some hard work for sure. Especially if you have kids and you plan to have a future together. It might be good for you to work on that and comes with some common ground, understanding how it's going to impact everyone and how the situation will play out. You got to put some work into that. You might have to look after the child. You might have to look after your kids. You might have to compromise. You can't just go about doing your daily duty. You know what I mean? And that means your routine, when you're looking at yourself as on this role and they're on the... See, this is where compromising comes in. Especially men. If a woman tells you, wait, I go to work just like you. I take care of this house. I clean up. I do my part. Sure, you take care of the car. But I got something going on here. So you're going to have to take this part up. Oh, I don't do that. I don't clean up. I don't take care of the kids. That's your responsibility. You're in this relationship. You're going to take care of these kids. That's what you to do. You're the woman. Well, woman or man, if there's times in need where you got to switch it up and support each other and find some common ground, when you got kids and responsibilities, if you're not willing to do that, that's not going to help. That's not saving the marriage. Sometimes you have to take a break from your routine to prioritize what's important. What's going to work for you and them. But if you're not willing to compromise on some key issues before they become problematic, then they're just going to keep popping up and it's not going to change. And really, there are people who are actually sad enough to live that way, where they don't compromise, and they could do that for years and just ignoring and the expectations of, I do this and you do that. It becomes static, and there becomes an unhappiness in the relationship. There's no bending. There's no compromising. And that is where it gets sad. It is. So if you're one of those people that are stuck in your ways and you think that you have the best way and your marriage is going down the drain, that's because you're not willing to change. And a lot of the times, that's what it is. People unwilling to bend. Over time, they become stiff. They become hard in their ways, set in their ways, and they're not willing to be flexible. And it becomes like a brick wall. You can't go through. There's no communication going through. Think of it like that. It's a communication breakdown in all different types of ways. But think of it like you used to be open. You used to be willing, compromising. And as time goes on, you become rigid and hard in your ways. And it's a breakdown. But when it comes to saving your marriage, it's not just about the rescue process. It's also about doing some kind things, random acts of kindness. Really, random acts of kindness can help save your marriage from a divorce or separation. You might not even feel like doing it, but it's such a great thing. It has to start from somewhere. Even though you may not feel like doing it right now, performing an act of kindness for your partner can help rekindle the relationship. Take them out, surprise them, do a weekend thing, get them something that you know they're gonna like, show some appreciation. You know, the appreciation of kindness is universal, especially when someone isn't expecting it. If your partner has a negative attitude towards you, you don't want to reconfirm that by doing nothing. Show your partner something. Show them that you care, that you still love them somewhere deep inside. Display some kindness for your partner. This can help change your own attitude, because you may start to see your partner in a different light. You might start to see that person, hey, wait, there's a spark in them, and it's sparking it in me, and we have something here. So it's time that I start, hey, it didn't even take that much for that person to look at me and see me. I'm going to do something. I like this feeling. I want this thing. I want to work on this relationship. I love this person. When did I stop doing this for this person that I love? Well, I see how important it is now. Just little things that I'm doing, they're important. Not pointing the finger, taking responsibility, just showing them you care. Not just talking, not saying, hey, listening. What do they want? What do they like? How could I show them that they're appreciated? Let me take that step. Let me do something opposite of what I normally do. See, there's sayings out there where people say, you catch more bees with honey than vinegar. That's an old saying. But I think people forget that, though. People just come to expect. See, we're in a service world where we get serviced, and a lot of times it's no real reaction of appreciation or thank you. You know, we're shopping, we buy things, you know, we purchase. So we're in the exchange business, but we're not in the appreciation business. And see, I think what is happening is we've lost our way in the sense that we forgot how to communicate with people to get what we want. We think it just should be expected. And sometimes that happens in your marriage or in your relationship. You think that you're entitled to sex, or you're entitled to, you know, somebody making you something or taking care of you all the time. We think because we're in it, this is the expectation, and it becomes the norm. And see, when that person stops doing what we expect them to do, there's a breakdown. But we don't want to look at why they're stopping what they're doing. That's breaking this whole thing down. Because we become routine in our lives. So the expectation is that, you know, guess what? This is what I should be getting. This is what I've signed up for. So why isn't it happening anymore? And why am I not getting the attention that I used to do? Because we're not changing in any ways. We're not adjusting. We're not showing any more appreciation for that person. We're not even looking at the change that's happening in front of us. We're looking at what's wrong. We're not looking at why it's wrong. We're just looking at something is wrong. But we don't know. We're not looking at the antecedents, the things that have led up to this breakdown. We're only looking at that it's a breakdown. So there are many things that you can do to save your marriage if you really want to. And I've gone through a number of them. And there are more that you can do. But what I really suggest you do is that you start looking inside yourself and do some evaluation. And you take some of these tips that I'm giving you seriously. And you look at yourself and understand where you're coming from, what you're about, what you are working with, you know, and how you can either work and save that marriage, or you're going to give up on that marriage. But either way, I really believe we should be looking at ourselves and understanding, as the longer our relationships have gone on, how static has it been? And if we have been following the same routine and nothing's really changed, where are we? Are we going to fix this thing together? And that's what you need to decide. Working together can save your relationship if you're both on the same page. Well, I'm the counselor, and I want to say thank you, because we just talked about separation, divorce part 2, and I think that we've covered some really good materials, and I want you to talk to some friends out there and spread the word. And I think we're talking about relationships, and whether you're married or in any relationship, there are things that you do need to think about to have sustainability. So, thank you, my listeners, and until we speak again, take care of yourselves.